Hello everybody, my name is Sniping is Fun, and welcome you all back to my next The 5 list. I'm going to present to all of you here on YouTube. And today's list is going to be a continuation of the series of lists I've been doing recently of the 5 video game franchises from certain video game companies that need to make a return. I've already done 5 of these so far on Nintendo, the PlayStation, on Sega, Capcom, and Namco. Today's list tackles a certain video game company that used to be so beloved back in the day with their RPGs, and they still are. They still are popular with their RPGs and other various video game franchises they develop and publish and whatnot. But it seems like obviously a lot more recently than they used to be. There's negative flack against this company, and it's Squaresoft/Square-Enix. And this is going to be the 5 video game franchises from Square that need to make a return. And like I basically mentioned, this, just like Namco, just like Sega, just like Nintendo and the PlayStation, and all those companies, this company, Square, is also guilty of holding a lot of their franchises back and not using them. They use them once or twice and they throw them in the Square Vault in Japan, and they never use them until they bring them back, and then sometimes they don't bring them back. And the only time we ever see some of these characters might be in a, basically like in a cameo or something like that. Like they might be in a spin-off game or a crossover or something, but they don't get used in the mainline game or get a renewed series or a remake or something to make them new and continued and like a beloved franchise from Square. It goes all the way around. Every company I've basically mentioned in this series is guilty of it. It's no video game company out there seems to be not guilty of using franchises and then putting them dormant for years and then probably never bringing them back, let alone maybe sometimes bringing them back and only bringing them back like once and then throwing them back into dormancy again. Yeah. Before this intro gets on too long, though, without further ado, let me do this list, because this is an interesting list, because I think I found the perfect 5 franchises from Square's history that I think actually might make sense to bring back. And this would be the 5 Square franchises I feel need to make a return. And the first one is going to be a franchise that is not developed by them, but was published by them, 2 fighting games back in the PlayStation era. And I've talked about this series before, back on former lists on like fighting games, and you should probably know what it is by now. And that is Bushido Blade. 2 game franchises that were published by Square back in the PlayStation era days, the original PlayStation era days. The first one came out in 1997, the second one came out in 1998. And it's basically, for those of you that have not ever played Bushido Blade, it's basically a more realistic fighting game. There's no life bars, there's no nothing. It's just set in like feudal Japan. You pick your samurai sword or your whatever weapon you pick. You go into a battlefield, and the first one to beat their opponent wins. You have to get a good, clean kill. You have to actually kill your opponent and hit them right to knock them down and hurt them. You can break their legs. They have to crawl around the stage. It's more realistic. You can finish a match in like a couple seconds if you hit your opponent just right. It's very strategic, a very fun game series that would really nowadays Square would stand out to the Street Fighters, the Smash Brothers, the Mortal Kombats, the Blaze Blues, and every other fighting game franchise out there. Like you're known for your RPGs, Square. That's basically like Capcom's known for their fighters. You're known for your RPGs. So like I said in other videos, in order to diversify game lineups and genres represented and everything like that, you need to jump out of your comfort zone and start pushing other franchises in different genres. And this franchise from you, Square, would be just that, to get you back into the fighting game genre with Bushido Blade 3, or you could just call it just Bushido Blade, because obviously a lot of gamers out nowadays probably wouldn't know a single thing about Bushido Blade. And you could just pull all these game companies do this, where they just out of nowhere bring a game back and just call it Punch Out or Ratchet and Clank or whatever, and they just it's like a 5th or 7th game in the series, but it's just called that, no number on the end. You could just call it Bushido Blade. Just bring Bushido Blade back, because you should jump back into the fighting game genre, because you can make something that's original and different compared to like Tekken and Soul Calibur, Smash Brothers, Darkstalkers, Rival School, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Blaze Blue, Guilty Gear, and all those other fighting games out there nowadays. Bushido Blade still has a place in this industry as an original, different fighting game, and I think the original concepts that came from it would make sense to be brought back. And maybe a franchise published by you, you may not have developed it specifically, but I'm assuming you still own the rights to it. I'm hoping and assuming. So just get a different team to work on one. Bring back some of the old team if possible. Work on it yourselves. I don't care. But Bushido Blade is a franchise from you, even though it's not directly made by you. It should make a return. That's my first one. My second one goes to a franchise that's not even directly a franchise. It's one singular game. Came out in 2000 on the PlayStation 2. It's a beat-em-up game with RPG elements. And if you know Square-Enix games that have come out, and you know your research and done your research, and you know that concept I just mentioned with that year and that system, you know exactly the game I'm talking about. And that's The Bouncer. The Bouncer was such a fun beat-em-up game. It's like a one singular game. And I loved renting it back in the day, and now I own it, and it's one of my favorite PS2 games. Not top 10 material for me, but I love it because I love RPGs and I love beat 'em ups. And you basically have a beat 'em up that you kind of level up your character as you go, your characters as you go, depending on who you play as. Basically, it's the main character Sion, Volt, and I forgot the other character's name, Kovu. There, I think that's his name. And you basically go save, Dominique or whatever her name is from her. The evil dude that does this and that, and you go through the mission fighting ninjas and guards and soldiers and thugs on trains and in power plants. And imagine Final Fantasy characters if they were in a fighting game trying to save the world. That's basically what The Bouncer was. So for those of you out there that have never played The Bouncer, I suggest if you have a PS2, pick it up, maybe download a ROM if they do that. I don't know if it's ever been on a ROM. Find a way to play The Bouncer so you can experience its greatness. It's not the greatest beat 'em up game in the world. It lacks compared to like a Captain Commando or a Final Fight or a Streets of Rage, really. But it's kind of a modern take on it that's still fun, and the RPG elements do diversify it from all those series. And it is a one singular game, so it's not a franchise specifically, but if you make a sequel, Square, we can have a Bouncers franchise. I would say maybe you should HD remake this game probably, and that might be the best opportunity to start at it before you make a Bouncer 2 or something. But it's such a fun game, and like I said, variety in genres, genre representation, diversifying your lineup of games. You focus so much on RPGs, like I mentioned with Bushido Blade, a fighting game with this, a beat 'em up with RPG elements, which is what you're good at. So, Bouncer returns now, please. The next franchise, this is the third one on this list, goes to a franchise that started on the PlayStation in 1998. It is a survival horror game, which you would not suspect to hear from Square. This is not Capcom we're talking about, this is Square. It has had 3 games since then. The first one, like I said, was 1998 on the PlayStation 1. The second one came out around 1999-2000 on the PlayStation 1. And the third one came out a couple years ago, around 2010-2011 on the PSP. And that's Parasite Eve. It was such an interesting concept. It's based on a book, so that's interesting from them. They took like a book and actually kind of go and do their own interpretation of it, and had a movie and everything. It's set like in space with like monsters and creatures and whatnot, and you're trying survival horror, the world. Like just take Resident Evil and put it in space or something. That's basically what it was, and it was such an original, unique concept. It is a beloved franchise. It is a hidden gem. It's not like one of their most popular franchises, but it does have its fans. It is like a niche game from them that basically a lot of gamers do kind of have, recollections of and memories of. And it is probably, if they name a game from PlayStation 1 that they might remember, the Parasite Eve franchise, they might remember. And they did bring it back with the third birthday in 2010-2011 on the PSP, so it's not like Square doesn't remember the franchise. It's not like Square doesn't love the franchise or care about doing it again, but it's been like 6-7 years since the last one. And I know, and it's been even longer between the third birthday and when they were doing the PlayStation 1 games, the first 2 in the series. But it's another game, Square, genre representation. Bushido Blade, fighting game. The Bouncer, beat 'em up. You got your survival horror game right here. You can make it such an interesting, unique concept. Make, Parasite Eve 3, even though Third Birthday technically counts as like 3, so Parasite Eve 4 then. There's probably more story to tell, and even if it's not based off books or anything, I'm sure you probably made original stories. You can make an entirely original story. I know you, Square. You've done stuff like Final Fantasy VI. You've done Kingdom Hearts series. You've done games that have big, unique, big, great stories. If it's not based off the books anymore, I don't know what was based off the books and how much you were trying to do original content and everything. Find some original stuff, set a survival horror game in space, and bring us Parasite Eve again. It is a franchise I do think not only your fans, but a lot of gamers around the world would like to see brought back. And it diversifies your lineup. You don't have a survival horror game like currently at the moment. You can compete with Resident Evil and whatnot. And it's not like it's that hard with Resident Evil 7 and whatnot. Not saying the name's bad, but Resident Evil's had a rocky road. Get in there and you can be competition for them. And other ones too, like the Evil Within and whatnot. That's my third one. My fourth one is going to go to not a Square franchise, but an Enix franchise. And for those of you that are confused with that, Square-Enix used to go by the name just Square or Squaresoft. Enix was its own company developing stuff like Dragon Quest and whatnot. And then eventually they were competitors, and eventually Square bought them out, and they're all one big company now. This is the company that made this game. This is specifically Enix-based game, but I'm assuming because Square owns Enix now, they own the rights to this franchise. And that goes to ActRaiser. ActRaiser was a 1990, one of the earliest games on the system's launch of the Super Nintendo. It was basically a side-scrolling action-adventure game with some city-building elements. You basically played the role of like a god that tried to fight demons and bring civilization back and blah, blah, blah. And you went into stages as like some warrior and fought monsters and crap. And you were playing like a god-type character or some god's guardian-type character to save humanity and whatnot, rebuild the world and the cities and fight the evil. And they made a sequel to it on the Super Nintendo in 1993. It took away the city building elements, which a lot of fans don't really like, but they kept up the RPG, the action adventure, side scrolling action adventure type elements to it. How about we get like an ActRaiser 3 or whatever? Keep the city building elements. I think that's what a lot of fans love the original more than the sequel. City building elements, you have a god character that comes down to the world, rebuilds it, fights the evil demons and devils and monsters and creatures, and rebuilds humanity. It's like, you don't have too many action-adventure games either. This list is such Square getting more franchise representation and more genre representation. It's so funny. But yeah, ActRaiser, bring it back. You have your side-scrolling, city-building, action-adventure an awesome game. Maybe you can add some RPG elements to it because that's what you're best at. Like I mentioned before, Square, dive into your Enix library. I know you still do Dragon Quest, but there's other franchises from Enix as well, and this was published by them back in the Super Nintendo days. A classic they could bring back, get new fans into it, and show love to your old fans, to the old fans that played these games back in the day. And the fifth one is going to go to a super obvious answer that everyone's going to want to see back from Square because it's one of their most beloved RPG franchises that's not named Kingdom Hearts and especially not named Final Fantasy. And that goes to the Chrono series. How can you forget the Chrono series? We have not had a game in the Chrono series in a long time. The first one was obviously Chrono Trigger in 1995 on the Super Nintendo. It's basically had 3 games since then. I do believe there was a spin-off in the middle. I don't remember the second game all that well. But the third game was Chrono Cross, the one right here, and it was released in 1999 on the PlayStation, the original PlayStation. The first one was more like a time-based RPG where you kind of fought alongside the enemy, and then it became a turn-based RPG in Chrono Cross. Pick one, probably the time-based one because it stands out and it's different from your Kingdom Hearts and your Final Fantasy, even though Final Fantasy's kind of diversified itself a lot lately as well from you guys, becoming more action-oriented. But the Chrono series is a classic RPG franchise from you that's not Final Fantasy that was pretty decently big in the 90s. It was at least on the level of a Breath of Fire. It was on the level, it might have not been Final Fantasy status or Dragon Quest status, but it was Breath of Fire and whatnot. Other RPGs at the time. There was a ton of classic RPGs from the 90s that wasn't your beloved Final Fantasy, Square. And this is another RPG franchise from you that a lot of fans remember and a lot of gamers out there would like to see. there's really only been two major ones. Like I said, that middle game that between Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross, I don't remember what it was though. I actually didn't even know about it. I only knew about Chrono Trigger and Chrono Cross. And the only thing you guys done recently with this is in 2008 you ported Chrono Trigger over to the DS. When are we going to see a new one? Square, do you still have the rights? Can you still do this? Because you have other RPG franchises, and I know I diversified you with like horror-based games and beat-em-ups and fighting games and whatnot. But this is what you're good at. Freaking RPGs, and you have more than just Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. Please bring this back, Square. And that's it for my Square list. We have The Bouncer, we have Parasite Eve, Bushido Blade, ActRaiser, and the Chrono series. Put in the comment section what you guys think. Do you guys agree with these 5? Do you guys want to see any of these 5 brought back? And what other Square franchises out there do you personally want to see brought back in the gaming industry for newer games on the Switch and the PlayStation 4 and whatever the heck else we do? PSC and Xbox One and whatever. Come on. I know you guys want to name some. It's freaking Square-Enix. They're so beloved. Put in the comment section. We have fun there discussing that. My name is Sniper's Fun. Peace. Please subscribe if you want to. Have a lovely day. And stay tuned for the next list from this. Because next time, and this is the first time I'm going to announce what my next company I'm going to talk about is, it's going to be the company known as Konami. And this list is going to be so fun to talk about because it is so needed. See y'all later.